Happy Monday or Friday. It's Friday here. It's Friday here. But we're recording for Monday. So happy Monday, because when you see
And
this,
we just
it
had
will
a
be
whole
Monday.
conversation about this, and I thought that we weren't going to pretend it was Monday. Nicole, I never know what to expect from you.
We're pretending it's Monday. But what
Okay, we're
happened
just
is
greeting the
we
people
said,
on Monday. Now I
that's
get
right,
it.
that's right. We're just right, because what
I didn't
happened
know.
was we said, oh, we'll just do what we always do for Mindset Monday. And what I always do is say happy Monday. And so I said happy Monday. And then I was like, but it's not Monday, it's Friday. We're recording this. So
Sorry to disappoint y'all.
that's
Kayla had to
okay.
get a job, and now we're pre-recording.
It's totally
So,
fine. No, but yeah, it's all good.
so while
I
you're
just am
watching
so
this,
glad.
think of me. I am learning a new job.
So anyway, we are okay. So we've been working really hard to tie these Mindset Mondays to the Wednesday calls, like pulling through all of the things, the mindset that's required in order to execute. And so last week we really talked about because it's July, y'all. It really is July, and it's the month of independence. And so everything
Whoop,
that we're
whoop.
going to be talking about, I know, right? Everything that we're going to be talking about this month is focused on the word independent when we talk about independent client funded advocacy, because this really touches everything. And so we talked about, what is an independent advocate and what makes us different. That's what we talked about on Wednesday. Today we really want to get into the mindset piece of that. And Kayla has pulled, um, Kayla, what is that? What's that statement that you pulled?
Yes. So our anchor line for this week, the
Yes.
piece that I want you to take with you after this conversation is conviction does not require confrontation.
I really do like this. Go ahead. What were you
And
going to say about it?
the reason that we wanted to talk about that and kind of bring some focus to that is, Nicole was sharing that a lot of times when she's having these kinds of conversations with others and even with other advocates, that it's very easy for us to get to this place of um, kind of where we're talking about like how bad the system is and how we're different from that, and we are. And at the same time, we should need to be careful about the way in which we're speaking about that, because while I think just about everybody can agree that the current state of the healthcare system is not functioning well to serve the patients that it is intended to serve, at the end of the day, there's individual human beings that we are interacting with who are doing their best. And, speaking from experience, a lot of them are share some of the same frustrations. So when we start talking from a place of like, oh, well, our independence is so important because like the system is bad and broken, that can actually get kind of off-putting to the very people that we need to recruit and be on our side, essentially. And so we just kind of wanted to talk about this and how do we strike that balance between, being convicted of our independence and how important it is and why it's important, but without being confrontational about it.
Mm, right. Yeah, because this, I think, where a lot of advocates shrink from the independence piece and want to, not or not don't want to, I don't think not want to. I think are uncomfortable with, speaking with that level of conviction about why the independence matters and why the alignment matters and being different from the system. Um, Now, don't misunderstand, there's a lot of advocates who don't have a problem with that.
I was gonna
and
say,
are
I think
really strong
this
in
is
that
one
area.
where
Yeah.
the pendulum tends to swing both ways from like
Yes.
what I have seen, heard, and witnessed in our community.
Yeah. Me too. Me too. And I think what we're trying to talk about is how do we find the center, right? And be be convicted without creating tension and conflict. And it's hard. Yeah, I think, it's really interesting to me because I was just thinking about, well, why would I start to think or feel like my conviction um, creates conflict? And you know what? I'm I am I get pretty charged up about this. Like it's like a fire in my belly, and I get pretty passionate and emotional around the conviction part of this. My conviction about our independence and why it's important. And I think that um, raw passion can sometimes feel like confrontation sometimes.
Mm, mm-hmm.
And not that it's intentional, right? And that's kind of where I wanted to go with that, is that sometimes it's just passion that, is so hot and so that it can feel confrontational to others. Um,
Yeah, that like that kind of I mean, fire is fire. You described it as
right?
a fire in your belly, and that's
Yeah.
accurate. And fire burns when it gets out of
Yeah.
control. Like, there is a reason that if we want to carry the fire with us, we have to put it in something to contain it.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's something, so maybe the conversation is, how and when and where do we, release that? Um, 'Cause I'll tell you, if a lot of you listening, Kayla for sure, and a lot of you watching and in our world at Patient Advocacy, have heard me speak about this, have heard the passion, and heard, I mean, you know what I'm talking about when I say I get fired up about it. It's not, or not, and, and that is a very different, um, level of conversation when I'm speaking with you all in this environment than when I'm speaking with, a provider or an insurance
Right.
carrier or, all of those things. They don't get that level of they
Yeah,
get the
and it
level of conviction, they just don't get that level of passion,
right.
right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you got to be able to read the room and adjust for your audience. Because if, I mean, if you spoke to a group of advocates the way that you're going to speak to providers, then that's not going to serve the advocates, because it's
Right.
not going to clearly communicate like the why of
Mhm.
why this work is so important. And we need that we're the it's almost like a steam engine. Like, it's a lot to start and run a business, let alone do this actual work for patients. Like, we got to shovel a lot of coal in that fire and keep that fire going.
Yes.
So, like, this is the arena to share that passion and let it be infectious to others who also need it.
Yeah.
And when we are working with providers or the people on the other side of the phone for the insurance, or nurses and therapists, etc., if we come at them with that level of fire, they are going to feel burned. It's
Yeah.
just, it's not the time and place. And
Yeah.
it can be hard to kind of keep that front and center, especially when so much of our, we have talked about before that advocacy often gets sort of, I think, conflated with fighting
Mm.
for the patient. And
Mm.
I try very hard in my practice to stay far away from that dynamic. And I personally always come into conversations with those representatives of the healthcare system from a collaborative place of like, look, I'm going to assume we both want what's best for this person, and I know that
Right.
you're working with considerable constraints, so let's see what we can figure out together to get them what they need.
Yeah.
Because even though there's all of these problems with the healthcare system, and even though that person I'm talking to might be part of the problem because they're talking about the protocols and the this is how we do
Right.
things and whatever, you know, if you talk to them as the system and the problem, don't be surprised
Mhm.
when they continue to be a problem.
Right. Oh, for sure. I love this because this really kind of moves us into another piece of this that I was thinking about is it's really easy to get into comparison, right? When we're talking about this. Like, oh, I I'm not bound by, and these are examples. I'm not bound by hospital policy and procedure because I'm an independent advocate. And I think when we start to um, compare our roles to other roles, it can get us in trouble too. And I think that's another reason that it can start to feel like confrontation.
Mm-hmm.
And, because the truth is, and I said this on Wednesday, but the real truth is that every role is valuable and important. And I want to say that
Yep.
again, every role is valuable and important, just valuable and important in different ways, right? We all have a very specific role we play, and every role is important. And so if we start comparing our role to the social worker's role, to the nurse's role, to the doctor's, we're going to get in trouble. Like, it's going to start to feel like, don't you think?
Yeah, and like once it like I'll come back to it again. The last thing we want to do is offend or ostracize anybody who we need. Like, I don't know, the way that's just the way that I approach my advocacy practice. But my goal is I typically don't come in with a goal of like, let's find you a new doctor, let's get you a new nurse, like let's get you to a new hospital system. Like there's been times where that ends up being the course that we take, but that is never the goal out the gate. My goal is always focused on like, let's look at the team and the resources we have and how can we get these pieces that are right in front of us moved in a manner, it's like playing the hand that you're dealt instead of like demanding to have things reshuffled. Like it's harder, and you got to you catch more flies with honey than vinegar, and you got to focus a little bit more on your communication strategies. But that tends to work much better if you can work with what you've got versus trying to like, move all kinds of other pieces. Like often that seems like that would be, and that's a lot of times that's what our patients want too, or our clients, because they get so frustrated with where they have been that they just want to like start over. But I don't know, in my experience, that often ends up being just as much work and taking longer, because here's the thing, it all comes back to these systemic issues within the way that the healthcare system is functioning right now. So like you can change out those players, but you're still not changing out the overarching systemic issues that have helped to develop all of those problems in the first place. And y'all, if you haven't listened to the episode where I presented all about like my analysis of why the healthcare system is failing even when nothing is wrong, go back to that one because that'll
That. Yeah.
explain why this happens everywhere and
Yeah.
why just changing out the faces is not necessarily
Isn't the
meaningfully
answer.
going to get a better outcome. And that's why we have so much focus on like we have to be smarter about how we work with the people who are in front of us,
Right.
because you're just swapping out faces with the same set of systemic issues.
Right. Right. And if you've got a team that's already working on it and you can be the independent role, it's really interesting, Kayla, because I see this as because we're independent, we're able to have a different perspective on things. Like that's really where our value is that you know we're able to have a different perspective, we're able to see things all the way around the table, and if we're really good at what we do, we can lead folks in a way that nobody else is able to do. And I think that's really the value of what we bring, but it requires some really important soft skills. And And these soft skills are what we're talking about here a lot of times in Mindset Monday,
Yeah,
right? Is to get in
100%.
the right mind to be able to function in at that level. Um, I had a social worker at a SNF. I worked with this team to discharge a patient. It took us, I don't know, 8 months, 9 months to get them discharged back out into the community. But that was the ultimate goal. And after we had it all said and done, and we like did the final move out, we had our final discharge planning meeting. He was leaving the next day. That administrator and that social worker said to me, "We have never had a discharge go that smoothly for that long with that kind of success." And there is no doubt in my mind, I don't think it was me personally. I think it was my role that sat at that table that was able to do that, right? And that's the value that we bring because without an independent advocate, he'd probably still be in that facility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's because of the way like these roles are scoped. Like there's so many,
Yes.
like you've got all of these little people, not little people, but like you've got all of these people doing these things, and they're what is in their scope
Yeah.
of practice or their responsibilities
Mhm.
is limited. And so much of what patients and what our clients need goes beyond one person's scope. And when it does, it just, sometimes you do get that social worker or whoever who is willing to go that extra mile,
Mhm.
but oftentimes you don't. And that's another area where it's very easy for us to be judgmental and confrontational
Mhm.
with that person who's not willing to go the extra mile. But let me tell you what, that social worker who's not willing to do those extra facts, those extra forms or whatever, or make those extra phone calls, you know why? It's because she probably already has way too many people on her caseload, and she's already
Right.
skipping lunch just so that at some point
Yes.
she can leave the building today to go see her kids because she's already got way too much of a workload
Yes.
on her plate or his plate or whatever. I don't think I've ever met a male
Yes.
social worker, but anyway,
Yeah.
I digress. So like if we can have some empathy and some
Yes.
perspective to realize, at the end of the day, like human beings are very self-serving creatures, okay? And like it's kind of unreasonable to expect somebody who already has more to do than what is like reasonably understandable to just go do extra for a person
Right.
they don't even know, who doesn't
Yeah.
actually, have an impact on their
Right.
life. Like,
Yeah.
okay, well, now it's no wonder that this keeps happening and that nothing is moving forward with this person because you've got so many people who are so overwhelmed and everything is so fragmented and it all becomes nobody's job.
That's right. Oh my gosh, there is a whole thing about somebody, anybody, everybody, nobody. And someday we will talk about it. It is a story. It is a great story. But that is exactly true. And I love that we say this because I'm gonna interject just one little thing here. And I'm gonna say that when we have the propensity or the thought to think, oh, well, they won't go the extra mile or aren't willing to go the extra mile, I want to challenge that thought, right? Because what's really happening is they want to go that extra mile and it is not possible.
Yeah.
And that's where Kayla's talking about the constraints and the scopes and the like all of the things. Like it's literally not possible for them to do everything that they want to do, which is why why our role is so critically important and at the same time is not competing with any of the other roles at the table, right? And this is one of the things that I shared on Wednesday is there is not a single solitary role inside the current healthcare system that has the ability to do what we do.
No, because what we do is literally like it's the glue that fills the cracks of all of these other like so individualized role.
Yes.
And if we can hold that mentality when we are interacting with the people who make up this very broken healthcare system, I
Mhm.
think that we can actually go a lot farther, um not only in keeping those relationships intact, but then of course in getting what we need for our client, and honestly in a way that can be a lot less stressful than some of the ways that I have seen people go about things. But
Yeah.
anyways, that's just like that's what I like to keep in mind, and that's where I think that we can have the power of independence without it feeling like threatening or offensive. And it's just like, oh, okay, well, the holdup is this form getting faxed to this person. Well, I can do that.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And you just said that the fear of offending. And I think that's a real fear sometimes, right? Um, and we, because it just occurred to me that there are things that sometimes I hear people say, well, that's the social worker's job, or that's the nurse's job, or that's the doctor's job, or that's the practice manager's job and all of the things. But what I just heard you say was that we can, it doesn't matter if it falls. That's the other thing. Like, it doesn't matter where that task technically falls, what role it technically falls under. We have the ability to step in and say, hey, would you like me to do that?
Right.
I can take ownership of that instead of saying, well, the social worker should have done this.
Right.
Why
And
didn't
I
they
actually
do
want to
it?
take that one step
Yeah.
further. And I like to, because I'm going to piggyback on that. If you walk
Yeah.
into a room and say, hey, I can do that, there is a tendency that that person might get offended that you
Offended.
think that they're not capable of doing it. So I
Yes.
like to frame that in a way of like, hey, I've worked bedside, and I like to tell people that. And I'm like, I've been either in your shoes or like close to it, whatever fits that moment. And I say, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, you probably have more people on your caseload
Hmm.
than you feel like you have the capacity to serve, and I'm here to help. So this thing, they need it to get done, and I'm happy to take that off your plate for you. And when you
Right.
show up like
Yes.
that, they're usually like,
Yeah.
wow, great, thank you so much.
That's right. Oh my God, you're a
And
godsend. Yeah.
right, and we're getting we're
Yes.
getting the job done, and that is how we can illustrate how our
Yes.
independence is not threatening, it's not offensive,
Hmm.
and it's not something that we should be afraid to present or backing down from. And i
Yeah.
i just I think that that is the healthiest way to go about it, in my opinion, in the most
Yeah.
collaborative tone, and just for me what has been the most successful. Because you also have to keep in mind, like, almost everybody who is working in the healthcare system is well aware of lawsuits and malpractice, and there's a good chance that
Yeah.
they haven't even interacted with an independent advocate before. But I can tell you, as a bedside nurse, the only time I saw the hospital patient advocate involved is when a family was threatening a lawsuit or something else big bad came
Damage
on.
control.
So, right. So, whether
Yeah.
you're aware of it or not, simply presenting as an advocate for the patient, especially one that doesn't come from the hospital, is going to put people on red alert from the start, because
Yeah.
and now they're all in a defensive position.
Yeah.
And I don't that's something that I don't know that we necessarily talk about that much.
Mm, yeah.
But you have to understand just what your presence is, maybe conveying that a message that you're not even trying to send. I don't think anybody here is
Right?
like trying to
No,
show up to be threatening, but a
no,
lot of times we
right.
are perceived as like a couple steps away from an attorney.
Especially initially, until we get in and start doing the work and saying things. I was going to share one of my favorite phrases, just because to piggyback off of what you were saying, Kate. One of my favorite phrases is, "Hey, would it be helpful if?"
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like that's a place because again, it puts things in the perspective of, would it be helpful if, and then fill in the
Mm-hmm.
blank or whatever. And again, that is something that I've used once I've been established. So I'm not like, and that's a whole thing. Like, how do you come
Yeah,
in?
and
How do
that's
you
and that's
establish? How do
another
you move
way that
forward?
you
Right.
can preserve that person's autonomy of their role. So it
Yes.
doesn't feel like that you're coming in and trying to like steamroll or demand, or again, like it's
Yeah.
threading the needle of being strong and convicted without being misinterpreted as aggressive or a threat.
I love this because it really leads into the conversation. Like, we can be respectful and have a dissenting opinion at the same time. Like they can happen at the same time. Um, and I'm thinking about this discharge planning process because I was often the person that was um, the dissenting voice at the
Yeah.
table. Um, because there were a lot of times that it was like, oh, well, that's not possible. We won't be able to get that done in the next week and a half, or we won't. Like, there were lots of things that my my role in that situation was to challenge things, right? Because we were trying to do something that quite frankly doesn't typically happen. It just doesn't typically happen. I knew that it was possible, and I knew that it was
Mm-hmm.
possible with my client, and I knew that we
Mm-hmm.
could do it. But it was out of the ordinary.
Sure.
And so there were lots of times that, and so back to what I was saying was I think that we can be that dissenting voice and challenging voice, um, and maintain respect and not.
Yeah. Yeah, one of my
Help me out,
go-to
Kayla.
phrases.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of my go-to phrases is, please help me understand how this decision is supporting this goal. Like,
This
please help me
goal.
understand how this discharge plan is safe for this particular person with X, Y, and Z in mind. Or please help me understand how this medication is going to be treating these symptoms over here that this medication doesn't actually treat. Like, that's typically
Right.
how I
Yeah.
say to the people involved, this thing that you're doing is a move of placation and not actually a needle mover. And when you put
Yes.
it in their face like that, so respectfully, so humbly,
Right.
of please help me understand how this solves the problem, they either have to answer the question that it doesn't solve the problem, which then brings the issue back onto the
Focus
table
back.
for the next possible solution, or they have to really commit to, frankly, being a dick and just ignore the concern or push it down altogether, which
Yeah.
then gives you information about how much of a team player your current
Right.
team actually is.
Actually is. Right. Yes, very much so. Very, very much so. Yeah. So there is, I love that. I love that because I think that it is, you know, so much. And again, it highlights the value that we bring to the team because we are outside of the system and independent. Because honestly, and Kayla, we both came from inside the system. So we know like how much time did I actually spend strategically thinking about each individual patient that I was serving at the time? And
Right.
again, it goes back to constraints and scope, and like you can only do so much. And so sitting in that meeting, because we're independent, that is our job, is to be
Yeah.
strategically thinking about that patient, that client, not the other 35 or the other 45 that are on the caseload on the other side, right? And so in full, like, just reality is that, you know, our clients are looking for us to lead that strategic conversation and to ask those questions. Because again, when you have 45, 50 patients, I've had some social workers that I know that have 75 patients that they're trying to, I mean, it's insane.
That's
It's
insane. I mean,
crazy. It is,
and when their caseload is that high, they're just
yeah,
literally like, do I have somewhere to put this person? Okay, great. Like that's and
that's
sometimes
right.
even the bandwidth for that is limited, you know? It's
Right.
and
It's,
that you can translate that across almost every role in healthcare. Like almost every individual who is playing a role at that job is completely overburdened and
yes.
hitting the bare minimum. I technically did my job is
Yes.
already an accomplishment.
That's right. That's absolutely right. 110%. And so, asking them, it's so, oh, yeah. So asking those questions becomes so important. And, when we're able to stay focused, stay convicted, stay respectful, own our role at the table, it gets better outcomes. And other professionals can look at that role and be like, wow, I'm glad you were at the table. Right? Like that's awesome. You were at the table, you were able to help us do that and get that taken care of. I love it. So the bottom line on that is that respect and disagreement or differing dissenting opinions can coexist at the same time at the same table and have good outcomes, which I think is what I was trying to say originally, I think.
Yeah. Respect and disagreement can
Yeah,
coexist.
right. It doesn't have to be one or the other. Um,
And we can
you know,
challenge without
yes,
being offensive.
yes, very much so. Very much so. I
So,
think that really, oh, go ahead.
oh, I was going to wrap it up. So you say your thing.
Yes. Well, I was just going to say, I think that the overarching thing that all of this says is again, independent client-funded advocacy is truly a leadership role in the healthcare system. That's the role that we play, and I think when we come to it with humbly and with integrity and without ego, like. I don't need to win this. I need to get the best outcome for my client. I need to best represent them. It really does just highlight how important this our role is and continues to be, and is only growing. And so I think this whole conversation is super important. What about you? What is our challenge for the week? Where were you going to
Yes.
wrap it up?
So this week I want you to sit down and think about where you fall on this pendulum. Do you tend to be somebody who maybe comes in a little fiery and we need to curtail that a little bit? Or are you somebody who kind of softens your presence because you are uncomfortable with disrupting things or asserting that independence? So first identify where you kind of fall on that spectrum, and then identify an area where you want to work a little harder on bringing yourself closer to that middle ground.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Kayla. Hey, y'all, we're out of time. Take the challenge. I would love to hear in the comments below, like, what are you working on right now? Where are you implementing this? All right, you guys, have a great week. We'll be back on next Monday, same time, same place, all the good things.